Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of Friday Night Knives here on A Dose of Drew. And tonight we're doing something a little different. It is not a folder knives. In fact, I'm doing a set of different kinds, but all one time. The Spyderco Z-cut offset. And there's a good reason for it tonight, folks. There really is. This is quite literally one of the best steak knives I've ever used. And I actually have them in the order I think they are good at. I particularly like the plain edge round tip. The serrated round tip is next in my line. Next, as far as I'm concerned, this is top of the line. This is number one, number two, and number three. I do not have a serrated, basically Warncliffe or whatever, or sheepsfoot, whatever you want to call it. I don't have the actual pointy one that is in the serrated. I'm not usually a serrated knife, but I did get the round tip one to try it because I actually don't use these as paring knives. That's what they're marketed as, but I don't use them as such. I use them as steak knives, and as such, they're one of the best steak knives I've ever used. I believe Spyderco is intending to discontinue them. I'm hoping to start to lobby for Spyderco to not, simply because these are just quit marketing them as paring knives and market them as steak knives, because they really are the best, and I'll get into that in a minute. But first, just a little bit, we'll go through I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these other two. I'll bring them in if they need to be, but for the moment, I'm going to use the plain edge round nose as the measuring stick here. It is about 8 3/4. We'll go that about 8 3/4, a little bit under from tip to tail. Of that, we have a little over, as the crow flies, about 4 1/4 inches. Little under that, 4 1/4 inches of sharpened edge. Little bit of bolster, which is perfect. Kind of sucks for sharpening, but there's other reasons why these are really difficult to sharpen as well. We'll get to that in a minute. Just go through a couple of the standard comparisons here. First off, this is it compared to your normal paramilitary 2. So as you can see, it is slightly longer with quite a bit more cutting edge. And of course, with the Para 3 lightweight here, as you can see, well, they both have quite a bit of handle here. Well, they all have a similar amount of hand space. It definitely wins out on the edge competition. All right, so on that one, the cutting edge is just there, and we won't even get to just how thin that blade stock is, because that stuff is ridiculously thin. Some of the thinnest blade stock I've ever used. Definitely paring knife blade stock, and I hope that never changes. All right, next up, just a blur. As you can see, it is bigger both in hand space, just by a little bit, as well as cutting edge. And of course, not just any leak, but a random leak. Oops. And it does spin around a lot here on the table. As you can see, once again, hand space wins as well as cutting edge. Alrighty. And for anyone else who just can't go without the last bits of comparison here, there it is compared to the Benchmade Bug Out, and there it is compared to the Civivi Elementum. All right, so there's those right there as far as those particular bits go. And of course, whatever, it's a kitchen knife. Anyway, all right, so next up on here, a couple of things on here. It's not exactly a full tang. If you take a magnet, you can see as I move it down here, right? Whoa, it's like right about there. So there's about where the magnet sticks, and then it falls off. Anyway, so you got about 2 fingers, about a finger and a half, about 2 fingers for me, probably a finger and a half. If you're one of those people who has larger hands, it's probably a 1 finger tang. It's where, as a steak knife, it's where all of your pressure is, right? You got it in a pinch grip. You're right here. You're pushing down all of your leverage is right there, so you can get the most pressure out there. So it's not so much of a problem, especially since you have the injection molded handle, which is completely one piece injection molded over the tang. You can have, you can have ways to keep this from pulling out. You can have keyhole slots. There's all sorts of ways. I would go for an open hole design or a skeleton. I actually would have gone for something that would have just been like an open skeleton design. Closed it off somewhere. I understand how cheap it is, but especially with this thin a stock. Usually about $19.99 I have found these to be going for. Spyderco's definitely making some good money on that. But, well, one quick thing here, just to get an idea. These are very small, very light, right? 1 ounce. 1.01. What do you think the average is? Let's see. So out of the 3, we've got, let's see, if I blow all the stuff off of the thing, nope, still 1.01. Right, so 1/100 of an ounce more. For the serrated one. I'm assuming that's a matter of just grinding variation. The other 2 are right smack with 1 ounce apiece. Very, very, very good steak. It's extraordinarily thin blade stock. Like that is maybe a millimeter. Let's see. I actually have, see if I can get that in. That's right there for 20. It is like 1.1 millimeters, you guys. That blade stock is ridiculously thin. Okay, ridiculously thin. Makes it cut through meat and steak and stuff so well. So slicey. Full flat grind. Little tiny spidey hole, so you know it is Spyderco USA. CTS BD1 and steel. Definitely good edge holding, but it's probably the single worst thing about this knife. We'll get back to that in a minute. First thing about the design. The Z-cut offset here. Oh my goodness. The finger clearance. For a steak knife, look at that. Like, if I'm cutting on a plate, my fingers are not where I always have to go on the tip, and I have a whole thing that I always have to, like, reach out. Not where the blade's straight out, but with the offset like this, my ability to cut through, especially with something like, right, the serrated, absolutely fantastic. The other thing is, the normal position where you go up on tip means you can actually go up onto a rounded, non-sharpened part of it and cut through. It goes all, you can go right up to there, right? You can go up and just cut through a little piece. You're not de-sharpening it on something like a plate that's really hard. And you actually can cut through it. So the round nose is my favorite. The reason, it is the one reason why I prefer it over the pointy-ended one is that, yeah, you can do it right there, but if you go up any higher than that, you're digging the tip in, and if you're using ceramic plates and stuff, you're going to round the tip off and dull it, so it'll stop working. If you're using things like paper plates or anything smaller, you stand a really good chance of putting that sharp little, let's see if I can get the light on it better. You stand a really good chance of putting that sharp little tip right through it. You know what I mean? So that's the one reason I don't like the pointy knife as much as a steak knife. The end will dull on ceramic or tend to cut through paper. It'll cut through meat just great, but it tends to do. This is much better as something like a paring knife. I do use this every once in a while as a knife, like if I'm coring out peppers or something like that, where this can get in, and it is super flexible with that thin blade stock. Ridiculously flexible, and the pointy end on this one works better than the rounded end for getting into there and getting little tiny tips off. So this does work a bit better as a paring knife than a steak knife, but it still works really good as a steak knife. Back to that in a minute. I am not a serrated fan, but man, let me tell you, for kids, the ability to have your fingers off and have a natural way to go about it, push down on it and use it, have a rounded end so your kids can't stab each other as much as I wanted to with my sister and brother when we were kids. I'm really glad we didn't. You know, it's one of those things. Like, it's this ridiculous, almost because it's so thin, there's even a high hardness, there's going to be a lot of flexibility, right? So you get really good edge retention with the BD1N. But I'm going to show you the problem with it here. Let's see if I can get that focused in. See those chips? I don't want to say chips because they're not. So BD1N is not that corrosion resistant. Single biggest problem is that even just literally having cut some stuff with it and then go like take a shower or something, come back and have enough rust build up that, and not only that, but spot and pit. The worst kind, especially on something this thin with such a fine edge, pitting on the edge, and you can even see some more tarnish right. There's like a black spot. Let me see if I can get that. You can see the tarnish spot right there. A couple more on the ends. It seems to pit. BD1N seems to pit a lot. And I hope that's the reason they're discontinuing it. What I hope they do is I hope they bring, at the very least, they bring these back as steak knives in something like 154 cm. Something that has really good edge retention, is relatively cheap to get. You can still make a cheap knife out of it, or inexpensive, I should say. You can still make a good, inexpensive knife out of that steel. Good corrosion resistance, really good pitting resistance, so you don't have edge wear from something like, I don't know, using it. And then letting it sit for a minute. If you have carbon steel or something that isn't, you should absolutely wash it right away. I do expect for my stain resistant steels to be able to withstand at least a couple of hours in soapy water. They should be able to do so. This has not. They've been able to, before that happened, I've actually been able to put them through the dishwasher, and not have problems, not have the handle separate in any way. It's probably not recommended, but they could test it and find out. See what kind of cycles. But yeah, I've had the actual capability of putting it through. I would love to see tiers of this. I mean, yeah, of course we would love to see something like what? Magna Cut. It ain't going to be cheap. But 154 cm is relatively easy to source. You can get it within fairly good parameters. You can heat treat it, get it thin blaze stock like it is everywhere. It's a fairly normal standard, both in blade steel and others as a corrosion resistant tool steel. Whoa, getting crazy there. And you can do it. So the design on it really is fantastic, right? Steel's probably the worst. The aesthetics of it, it's a love it or hate it. It's going to be polarizing. Some people don't like it because of the drop shape. But you know what? Here's the thing I love about Spyderco. Once you put it in your hand, you understand exactly why it's shaped this way. Like being able to do so. And the second you use it to cut on a surface and you realize why the drop shape is like that. Why the Z offset is like that. And the ability to use it to do things like cut steak. Or anything else on a plate for that matter. Like I use it as a steak knife, but it is a table knife. I use it as a table knife infinitely more than I use it as a paring knife. I'll use this as a paring knife. And probably about 50-50 as a table knife. I have more uses as a table knife, and I only use this as a steak knife if these two have already been used and I'm having steak and I haven't washed them yet. Doesn't happen very often. I don't usually have steak like 2 or 3 times a day. So usually these are my steak knives, and only every once in a while I'll pick this up just for the giggles of it to use this as steak knife because I don't want to use the round ones. And I feel like being different for the day. So I do use these more. It's one of the reasons I got the serrated one. When I had just one, I used the pointy one more, but now that I have a serrated one and I can test it, I have less. The BD1N holds a great edge when it's not rusting out. Right? So far, the serrated edge has not had any of those problems. Any of the problems with the corrosion, I really like it. If they come back, I'm going to keep it. The aesthetics, again, definitely like it. The little Spidey hole, love it. Spidey USA, you can barely see it. In fact, I don't even know how well, that doesn't show up even. It doesn't show up as well on, you can see it a little bit every once in a while. It doesn't show up as well on camera. The laser etch does not show up as well on camera as it does in real life, but it's still not the easiest thing to see. It's not the hardest thing. Very, very low key, very, very subdued, subtle, nice. The aesthetics like so many Spydercos. I mean, what can you say? What can you say about Spydercos? But they are anything but normal. But once you get them in hand and you see how everything fits together, you understand why they're like that. There's an ergonomic reason to them, and these are no different. The mechanics on it, there's really no thing about the mechanics. As far as the mechanics go, I'll just go with like things like it could be a full tang, but at the $19.99 price point, it's really hard to get a bunch of these pumped out for much cheaper with a whole lot more steel in them. You might be able to if you go with like a 4116 or a 14C28N or AEBL, you might be able to get a full tang one. You'll lose a whole lot of like edge retention and other stuff in the process of doing so. So yeah, it's a trade-off. I'm okay with the stick tang on something like a steak knife. I have no intention of using these things for anything other than kitchen cutlery. So having something that's just a tang up to where I put the most force is absolutely fine by me in this. I don't want to go any less than that. And yeah, I would like it if it was more like a 2, instead of like a 1/3, if it was more like a half to a 2/3 tang, I would feel a lot better about that. But especially, or if it was skeletonized so that, you have like a wishbone style, there's all sorts of stuff we could get into, both with steel choice, how you could tier it. There's a marketable tier, but as long as you can keep your retail profitability costs at somewhere around 15, I would say even $12 to $15 a unit, then you can sell a whole lot of these in different steels. If you even can go up even up to like $18 a unit, if you can get a 12 to 15 tier and a $15 to $20 tier going of different steel types and how you build these, there's different ways that you can make this and sell them as steak knives and steak knife sets. You can sell 4 of them as sets, sell them in pairs and 4s and singletons, so that you can actually use them as steak knives. Because that's really what these things are best at. These are not very good paring knives in this form. Yeah, you can use them. They're nice. They work. And their flexibility, right? Good tempering. They don't take a set. You can bend them. They have that nice spring to them with that incredibly thin blade stock. You can maneuver them around things. Part of the reason they work so good as freaking steak knives. If I have giant broccoli, I can grab it. I can cut the broccoli. I can cut the steak. I can hack the potato. I can get in with the round tip, especially. I can get in and cut butter. I can use it to both cut things and use it as a spreader of things, which is really, really nice. The other thing is that if you're going to have steak knives and you have kids, these are really great. There's not really a pointy end for them to accidentally jab themselves with. The round end allows them to use, the round tip allows it to be very forgiving in their technique of how they use it on a plate or anything else. So there's going to be a lot less accidents with it. And it's relatively cheap enough to use. That's going to get me into one more thing about the mechanics and sort of like the noteworthy points on it, is that it's very difficult to sharpen these things. The flexibility of them actually makes it really hard to put a whole lot of pressure on there to sharpen out anything that's like a chip or anything difficult. It's a little bit easier on the serrated, which is another reason why I got it, is that since you're going one little bit at a time with like a serrated piece, the flexibility thing is less of an issue because the change over it from the flexibility does not affect it like it does on the smooth edge. It just is it's an easier thing, even in something like Work Sharp. The flexibility from putting from having the edges to here is pretty significant. So getting out to the tip, it's really hard to do something this small, even though it's the right blade size. The sheer thinness of the material and flexibility of it makes it really difficult to sharpen. So the smooth edge is absolutely the more difficult to sharpen of the two. Whereas the serrated, anything that would be considered like a normal Where I know I have one around here somewhere. I don't use it very often. There it is. Is that not it? Oh. Oh, there's one. All right, so anything that would be, and this is going to be really large for the screen here, but you'll get what I mean. Anything that would be a standard cone style sharpener will be able to sharpen this. And then since it's a chisel grind where the back is flat, any standard smooth polishing style whetstone will peel a burr off, right? You can run burrs all day and then strop this actually any direction and peel a burr off of it, right? You can strop that. Basically, you can sharpen this side, peel a burr off the other thing, and then strop it off this side on a whetstone. You can even roll into it if you want to give it a good edge. And then strap backwards or whatever. You can polish up the top. Really, really nice that they gave it a standard thing. It's the Spidey edge serrations are nice for certain applications. Really glad they didn't do it on this one, so that it makes it easier to sharpen for just about everyone. You don't have to really put a lot of effort or thought into it. You can see it, you can do it. It's a really nice, simple way to keep maintenance low for everyday folks, as well as a very effective, useful edge. And that's really what I want to get into as far as the intended purpose. I think that's the single biggest problem with what Spyderco has. They market it as a paring knife, and this is simply not a good paring knife, but it is absolutely the best steak knife I've ever used. I don't want another steak knife. I want this. In a dream world, I would get a full tang one of these in Magna Cut, right? In a non-dream world where I can just get a high-end one, I would get a 3/4 to 2/3 tang, or maybe even a half tang one of these in CPM 154. In a realistic world where I'm not going to spend that much money on a bunch of steak knives because I'm just a single guy with that, and even if I had a family and I'm buying like 4 of them, I want to maximize my money. I'd be looking at like a 1/3 to a half tang in 154 cm. That's just well built American made material that admittedly makes conditions, make some concessions, not conditions, make some concessions to cost in order to deliver a good American-made product, which is totally fine. Again, it's a steak knife. I love a full tang steak knife, but if you have something that even comes out like a wishbone style or something like that has like tang prongs or whatever that would go in, and so the injection molded is just really pulled in there, as well as giving it something like an I-beam you can really make a design inside here for these little stick tangs. It's fairly easy to stamp out and still get in there. I don't know if you can stamp 154 cm, but it's probably a good enough steel that you can get it done if you have to and still have the injection molding process. Anyway, that would be my one thing. The intended purpose is stated to be paring knife, and really it's just the better, it's a steak knife. This is the best steak knife I've ever used. This is not a folding knife. I know there's a lot of the times I'm doing folding knives, there's a lot of cool stuff on here, but I really wanted to throw this out there because Spyderco did an amazing job making an outstanding steak knife and then started telling everybody it was a paring knife, and I really just don't understand that. Which brings me to some of the next parts. The cost to value ratio, $19.99, yeah, it's not bad. Look, a set of 4 of them, you have to buy them one at a time. You can't buy them in a set. A set of 4 of them is going to cost you $80. There's no way for you to reduce that cost in bulk because they sell them as paring knives. Is it cheap? No. Is it inexpensive? It's compared to other brands. Like you can get some other brands that are like 4116 or X50 or, Crow CR or whatever, CRMOV, basically 420HC style stuff, depending upon which standard you're using, plus or minus a couple of elements, some percentage points or tenths of percentage points or whatever. But essentially the same thing. You can get those for like $160 for 4 of them, where they're like $30 to $40 a piece. That's not unusual in some of the higher ends where they have the full tangs and you get all these fancy little rivets and stuff like that. I don't care. I care. Look, give me one that works and then fancy it up. Give me a better design and then put fanciness on it. I'll take the design every day, which brings me to that cost value, $19.99. I would love to see a 154 cm set version of these where they go for something like, I mean, God, $15 would be great, but if it's like $17.99 for an individual and a set of 4 is like 60, that would be like the holy grail if you can make that price point. If you can't make that price point, make it $19.99 a piece, right? And then give me a set for like 70 to $75. And then we can and then work up from there. I know it's hard to get. I mean, $19.99 is probably really, you can probably make a little bit more, but I'll tell you, you'll make more profit if you do these as steak knives. My God, this is such a good steak knife. Like it between the sliciness and everything. Like, why is it a paring knife? Is it just because it's thin blade stock, so it has to be? I don't know. It's a better steak knife, and that's really the expectations request. Like the cost to value ratio at $19.99, it's okay. You can definitely get different for more money, where you have more steel but less function. You can get, it's hard to get more function, right? So you get really good function for the cost. So you can get cheaper ones, but you're going to get cheaper steel and cheaper materials, and they'll probably for it. These are really well made. They're high quality. There's definitely good quality control. Like I said, I've put them through the dishwasher. You're not supposed to. Full disclaimer, the manufacturer says not to do it. I have done it and have had no ill effects. I don't do it a lot. If I'm sitting there going and I have a whole bunch of dishes and I can throw everything else in the dishwasher and these are sitting in the sink, these aren't going to stay in the sink, they're going in the dishwasher. And I have done that a couple times to no ill effect. That is not when I had shipping or anything other thing. That was actually from leaving it. I had early dinner and I didn't get to dishes until approximately 11 o'clock. So maybe 5 to 6 hours of soapy water soaking after having been used. And I got pitting along the edge. That's what happened to this knife. So I would want a 154 cm on the whole expectations request in the nice categories here. Expectations request would be slightly longer tang if possible, or a better design for the partial tang so that it reaches longer, even though it may not use a whole lot more material. And 154 cm or some steel like that has really high pitting resistance. I'm fine with still a relatively easy and inexpensive steel to source, like 154 cm. It's a good steel. It's relatively easy to source. Please don't give me AUS 8 or AUS 10. Please don't do that. Give me 9CR18 or 154 cm. Give me, if you're going to really go shoot for the moon, give me American-made CPM 154. Okay, give me something like that. Do not give me that 8CR crap. I'm sorry, but I don't like it. I don't like AUS. It's good for bigger knives, right? It's good for bigger knives or something like that. If I want to do something that's like a slightly larger stainless, I can do 8CR13. I'm going to get relatively decent resistance if it's tempered back. Or relatively decent edge resistance for what it is. It's right at about the eutectic point, so I can temper it back and get relatively good toughness, have a lot of chromium, still have a lot of that chromium in solution. Like, there's a lot of good reasons for the 8CR. I just don't like it in smaller knives. So something like 154 cm to me, especially with its pitting and corrosion resistance, as well as its edge retention and toughness, some things that will only be enhanced by the thin blade stock and that it will really shine in is this application. So that would be my expectations request. I would expect and hope that Spyderco would realize the potential for this design as a steak knife, where they can mass market it as a steak knife amongst their giant network and pop this into all sorts of places as steak knives. Because you can pack these. They're light at 1 ounce a piece. You can literally pack a set of these in your backpack, and it's less weight than a lot of pocket knives that people will pack. So you can put 4 ounces of steak knives in your backpack, take these up to a camp, and have a set of steak knives. And if they're in 154 cm, you're golden. You don't need that. You shouldn't be using them for a lot more, but if you have them as like steak knives, either in camp, at home, in your RV or anything, they're light, they're easily portable, and ridiculously easy to use for anyone of almost any age. I mean, if you're old enough to cut your own food, you can probably use one of these. Yeah, you might hurt yourself, but my goodness, the amount of chances to hurt yourself with a bladed instrument on one of these versus others is massively reduced. So this is great for all ages. And that's really what I want. I want Spyderco to keep these going, but change steels and give me a slightly more robust design that allows me to see the value. If you can't do it at that, $18 a piece and $15, it's got to be a minimum 19. Maybe you can get 75 for a set. Then let's talk about going up to CPM 154 and doing 25 a piece and giving it to me for 80 a set. Can you do that? Can we do that with that upgraded thing? Is it possible to get that and make just a tiny bit of money on the set as long as you're doing volume? Because I would love that. This is my favorite steak knife. There seem to be starting to run out. I can't find there's probably some somewhere. I haven't done a deep dive. I'm not going to lie. I haven't done a huge amount of online shopping. But these round nose smooth edges are really hard to find anymore. And I hope that Spyderco, when things start normalizing with supply chains and stuff like that, that they can get some 154 cm versions of these with maybe a slightly different tang design or anything like that, and maintain them as steak knives. Because this is the best steak knife I've ever used. And that's actually how I'm going to pull out this review. 30 minutes in here, you guys. These are extraordinarily. I recommend these. 4 stars. The corrosion resistance problem with the BD1N steel is the one thing that keeps it being 5 stars. Everything else about these is absolutely great, with the one caveat that these are marketed as paring knives, and I'm going to even title, you'll see it should see it in the title, best steak knives ever, but they're marketed as paring knives. So there you go. 4 stars, but eminently recommendable, especially if you have kids. You need steak knives. These are great steak knives for kids, and once you use them, it'll be hard to go back to another one. This is what you'll want to use. I have never looked back. These are my new steak knives, and I don't want any others. I want any other steak knife I have to be this absolutely functional in being able to do its job. And that's hard to say and hard to find. Anyway, I'm going to let it end right there, you guys. This has been another issue of Friday Night Knives. Go ahead, take a look at this, watch it twice, comment as much as you like, be mindful of side effects, and remember to subscribe. This has been your Dose of Drew. I am said Drew, and you guys have a great rest of your night.